Muscle cars provided drivers with incredible speed and power, even to this day. But the golden age of these machines was in the 60s and 70s. And that's why today, we'll take a look at the best muscle cars that were made in the 1960s. Let's get into it. 1964 Pontiac GTO. What better way to start off the list than with the car that kicked off the 1960s muscle car era to begin with? Say hello to the 1964 Pontiac GTO. It was initially offered as an optional package on the mid-size Pontiac Tempest, and was the first truly mass-market high-performance model to follow the big displacement engine route. Released on October 1, 1963, and made available for purchase in 1964, the Pontiac GTO featured an engine powerful enough to make you temporarily deaf. Now, even if the Pontiac GTO was designed, constructed, and distributed in the 1960s, its performance statistics were absolutely phenomenal. It featured a beastly 6.4-liter tri-powered 389 CID V8 engine in place of the entry-level Tempest's 140 brake horsepower, unleashing 325 horsepower and allowing 0 to 60 miles per hour in an adequate 6.9 seconds, while topping out at 122 miles per hour. For a car created in an era where people barely even had cars at all, this machine was certainly ahead of its time. But it wasn't just the breathtaking engine, because the Pontiac GTO also featured chrome air cleaners, chrome valve covers, a heavy-duty suspension, as well as a dual exhaust system, which only made the roar of the Pontiac GTO even louder. It also featured a 4-barrel Carter AFB carburetors and a 3-speed manual transmission, which was controlled with a Hurst shifter. The transmission could also be upgraded to a 4-speed manual transmission or a 2-speed Super Turbine 300 automatic transmission. 1967 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. The Camaro was Chevrolet's response to the success of the Ford Mustang, which had been launched 3 years earlier. Arriving in 1967, the Camaro was a sporty coupe and convertible based on the Chevy Nova platform, but with some meaty engine options. There were RS and SS models, but the Z28 package was the real performance deal. Conceived by Vince Piggins himself, the Z28 option was introduced in December 1966 for the 1967 model year. It included chassis modifications designed for racing, disc brakes at the front, a heavy-duty 4-speed manual transmission, upgraded suspension, and racing stripes. The Z28 came standard with a high-output 302 cubic-inch small-block V8 designed for the 5-liter class in the Trans Am racing series. It had a 3-inch stroke crankshaft with a 4-inch bore, an aluminum intake manifold, and a 4-barrel vacuum secondary 780 CFM Holley carburetor. The engine's advertised power was 290 horsepower at 5,300 revolutions per minute, but it was underrated to keep the horsepower rating under 1 horsepower per cubic inch for insurance and racing classification purposes. To show that this muscle car was no joke, it took Ford until 1969 to mount a head-to-head competitor, the Boss 302 Mustang. 1966, Shelby GT350. Carroll Shelby was a Texas chicken farmer turned race car driver. In the 1950s, he raced for Enzo Ferrari, but his racing career ended in 1960 due to health reasons. However, Shelby didn't just step away from the automotive scene. He redirected his passion into creating some of the most iconic high-performance cars in American history. Among Shelby's most famous projects was the Shelby GT350, a super-tuned version of the Ford Mustang. Born from Ford's desire to give its new 1965 pony car a solid performance image, the GT350 quickly established itself in the National Sports Car Club of America B production class, reigning as champion for 3 consecutive years. The first Shelby Mustang, the 1965 model, was faster than the high-performance Mustang GT. However, it didn't sell well initially due to its high price and Spartan features. While most customers expected the most expensive Mustang to look the part, the GT350 was fairly bare bones. Despite its impressive performance, the car's minimalistic approach didn't resonate with many buyers. Shelby, therefore, made several changes in 1966 to make the GT350 more appealing and affordable. He added unique quarter windows, scoops, and additional badging to enhance the car's appearance. Despite some subtle softening, the 1966 GT350 remained as vivid as the 1965 model. After 1966, Shelby Mustangs became more like regular Mustangs, and Ford eventually took over their production. Consequently, the 1965-66 GT350 models hold a higher status and fetch higher prices among collectors today. The 1965-66 Shelby GT350, with its 289 V8 engine and 4-speed manual gearbox, combined with the body of the Ford Mustang 2+2 Fastback, remains one of the hairiest and most memorable American cars ever built. Its race car dynamic ability and street-legal usability ensure it will always be remembered as an automotive legend. Shelby, however, still devised a special model for the track, the GT350R. It featured special high-power heads, Super Duty suspension, racing tires, an aluminum transmission case, a stripped interior, and a bumperless fiberglass nose with a rudimentary air dam. These modifications reduced curb weight by some 300 pounds. The 1968 Ford Mustang Shelby GT500. In the first 2 years of Carroll Shelby's Mustangs, the 1965 and 1966 GT350s were loved by many Mustang purists for their lightweight, simple styling and track-ready performance. But the 1967 and 1968 models quickly became the preferred machines for drag racing enthusiasts. The 1967 and 1968 GT500 Shelbys marked the first time these models came equipped with a 355 horsepower, 428 cubic inch big block engine. Car testers of the era recorded impressive quarter-mile times in the mid to low 14-second range, which was considered quick for the time. To complement the increased power and torque, the Shelby Mustangs received more aggressive styling and additional scoops. A notable styling change between the 1967 and 1968 Shelby Mustangs was the use of tail lamps. The 1967 models utilized tail lamps from the Mercury Cougar, while the 1968 models adopted lamps from the 1966 Ford Thunderbird. This detail, among others, highlighted the evolving design philosophy aimed at enhancing the Shelby Mustang's visual appeal to match its performance capabilities. Shelby's 1967 GT500 had already set a new standard by crossing the 400 cubic inch threshold with a detuned 427 cubic inch race engine and a potent 428 cubic inch Police Interceptor V8. Both engines continued into the 1968 model year. However, in April 1968, Ford introduced an even better version of the 428 engine, the Cobra Jet, which was incorporated into the Mustang lineup and other models. At Shelby, the Cobra Jet engine replaced the original 428, and GT500s adopted the KR suffix, standing for King of the Road. This designation marked the second name change of the year. After Shelby's AC Cobra Roadster was discontinued in 1967, he retained the Cobra name, rebranding his Mustangs as the Shelby Cobra GT500 and Shelby Cobra GT350. The GT500 KR's 428 cubic inch engine was officially rated at a modest 335 bhp, though some Shelby materials suggested higher peak output at higher RPM. Shelby's version of the Cobra Jet engine included die-cast aluminum Cobra rocker covers, but maintained the same plain-painted Ram air cleaner as other models. Despite the understated appearance, the GT500 KR was a formidable muscle car, both in terms of performance and street presence. 1969. AMX-3. The 1969 AMX-3 was a stunning mid-engined exotic sports car, developed through an international collaborative effort. This ambitious project was led by AMC's head of design, Dick Teague, and involved contributions from renowned Italian engineer Giotto Bizzarini and BMW. The resulting vehicle was a sleek 3,300-pound machine powered by an AMC 390Ci V8 engine that produced 340 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. The AMX-3 boasted impressive performance, reportedly accelerating from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 5 seconds, and achieving a top speed of 170 miles per hour which were remarkable numbers for its time. But despite its impressive specifications and potential, the AMX3 never made it to AMC showrooms. The primary obstacle was cost. The car would have required a sticker price of nearly $15,000, only a few $1,000s less than the Lamborghini Miura, making it a terribly expensive proposition for AMC. Although the AMX3 never reached mass production, 6 prototypes were built. The prototypes ended up in private collections and actually resembled production cars more than typical prototypes. In 2017, one of these rare AMX3s was sold at auction for nearly $900,000. So even if it was not a commercial success, the AMX3 remained a fascinating chapter in automotive history, a testament to the collaborative spirit and ambitious vision that drove its creation. 1969, Dodge Charger Daytona, the radical racer. The 1969 Dodge Charger. Daytona stands as one of the most radical vehicles to emerge from the muscle car wars. Now, unlike your typical muscle cars, the Daytona was not designed for street racing. It was built with only one purpose in mind: to win NASCAR races on the super speedways, the longest and fastest tracks. The production versions of the Daytona came equipped with powerful engines, either a 440 big block or the legendary 426 Hemi. To achieve this goal, engineers increased aerodynamics. The modifications included a nearly 2-foot-tall rear wing, a flush rear window, and a longer sloped nose cone. One of the most distinctive features of the Daytona is its tall rear wing. However, it is said that the exaggerated height of the wing was not solely for maximizing rear-end downforce. These changes, however, significantly increased the car's top speed and lowered its coefficient of drag to an impressive 0.28, an excellent figure even by today's standards. The race version of the Daytona became the first car in NASCAR history to break the 200-mile-per-hour barrier. This performance led to numerous victories for Dodge in 1969 and Plymouth in 1970, eventually prompting NASCAR to ban these cars with a new rulebook. 1969, Ford Mustang boss, 429. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, NASCAR was in its golden age, with automakers taking stock car racing seriously, often designing engines and bodywork that were too wild for the street. To compete, manufacturers needed to sell 500 of these radical cars to meet NASCAR's homologation requirements. The 1969 Ford Mustang Boss 429 was one such beast, designed not for street racing, but as a backdoor ticket to dominate NASCAR. Although the Mustang itself didn't compete in NASCAR, the 375 horsepower 429 cubic inch V8 engine under its hood was specifically designed for racing. Built to rev to 6,000 revolutions per minute, this NASCAR-bound V8 was monstrously large and did not even fit in a stock Mustang's engine bay. Consequently, Ford contracted Carcraft to handle the modifications. But despite his efforts, the Boss 429 did not perform well on the street and was slower than other big block Mustangs of the time. Despite being detuned for the street, the Boss 429 could easily be tuned to make rivals disappear quickly. Only 8 Boss 429 Mustangs were built in 1969, with an additional 499 produced in 1970. These engines, though rated at 375 horsepower, often delivered much more with minimal effort. The 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. In 1963, Ford and other manufacturers were still relying on full-size cars like the Galaxy 500 to win in NASCAR and on the drag strip. While fast, the Galaxy was not competitive enough. Ford needed something smaller and lighter to truly compete in the 60s muscle car game. The solution came in the form of the 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt, another extreme rarity inspired by the need to win at the track. It was a stripped-out drag racer that combined the lightweight and compact Ford Fairlane body with the meaty engine developed for the larger and heavier Ford Galaxy NASCAR racers. The Thunderbolt emerged as a powerful solution to the challenges faced by the heavy Galaxy on the drag strip. ensuring Ford's dominance in the National Hot Rod Association's Superstock Championship in 1964. The Thunderbolt's engine, a high-output 427 CIFE big block, churned out 425 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute, according to Ford's official documentation. However, unofficial estimates suggested that this figure was closer to 600 horsepower. To further enhance performance, Ford took significant measures to reduce the car's weight. Plastic windows, fiberglass doors, hood, and wings replaced the traditional materials, making the Thunderbolt much lighter and faster. Additionally, plexiglass was used for the side and rear windows instead of traditional glass. These modifications not only improved the car's acceleration, but also its performance in the racing arena. Despite its primary design as a drag racer, the Thunderbolt was technically street legal. However, Ford included a disclaimer riveted to the inside of the glove box, stating that the model's fit and finish were not up to normal road car standards. This was a clear indication that the car was built for performance rather than comfort or aesthetics. The 1963 Plymouth Savoy Max Wedge, a hidden drag strip gem. In the development pipeline since 1959, the Max Wedge engine made its debut in 1962 as a 413 cubic inch powerhouse based on the RB block. It was designed as a direct response to Chevrolet's 409 cubic inch V8, and its introduction helped Mopar reclaim dominance at the drag strip. But in 1962, the Savoy underwent a significant redesign. Previously a full-size vehicle, it was shortened and reclassified as a mid-size model. It was offered with various inline-6 and V8 engines, with the 383 cubic inch engine serving as the top option. However, a select few Savoys were equipped with the 413 V8 in 1962, and with the upgraded 426 Max Wedge in 1963. While precise production numbers for the 426 equipped Savoys were elusive, clearly only a limited number were produced, making them extremely rare. This rarity, combined with the Savoy's understated appearance and powerful performance, makes it a coveted classic among muscle car enthusiasts. Despite their limited public availability, the 1962-1963 Max Wedge cars from Chrysler were pioneers in the muscle car genre, fitting the big engine in an intermediate body style that defined the era. 1969, Chevy COPO 427 CI Camaro. It is impossible to discuss 60s muscle cars without including the 1969 COPO Camaro. COPOs were made for various reasons on different car models, often to build out non-performance vehicles with special equipment. But it was soon realized that they could be used to backdoor Chevy's top engine into its lightest car, which could then be sold as a factory-built supercar. In this case, COPO meant a 427 cubic inch big block Chevy V8, a mill that was generally restricted to top-of-the-line Corvettes and full-size Chevys. Car enthusiasts usually point to the 1969 COPO Camaro with the 427 CI big block Chevy engine as the pinnacle of Chevy performance in the 1960s. However, there were actually two COPO 427 Camaros, the COPO 9561 with the solid lifter L72 iron block 427 and the rarer COPO 9560 with the aluminum ZL1 427 CI big block, of which only 69 were built. COPO Camaros were commonly known to be sold by dealers like Yenko, Fred Gibb, and Berger. In 1969, one could even get a Camaro with the V75 code liquid tire chain option, a thinly disguised remote-controlled burnout juice dispenser that sprayed a traction aid on the rear tires, of which at least one was added to a COPO Camaro. 1969. Pontiac GTO Judge. Pontiac really owned the muscle scene in the early 1960s. The 1964 Pontiac GTO, in fact, is widely regarded as the very first of the breed. But by 1968, that car had plenty of competition. The Judge was an options package that was only available for 1969 Pontiac GTOs. It was introduced to try and reverse the decline in GTO sales. GTOs had fallen into being moderately liked, mid-range cars. They weren't a well-made, cheap model, but weren't considered a premium model either. The thought within Pontiac was to make a cheaper version of the GTO with a smaller 350 CI engine called the ET, which stood for elapsed time, a drag racing term. Pontiac boss John DeLorean didn't like that idea. To him, no GTO could have an engine that small. So instead of doing that, the team built a car one step up from the regular GTO. DeLorean himself named the car after a popular skit on the TV show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. The Judge featured the 360 horsepower Ram Air 3 engine standard, but buyers could also opt for the more hardcore 370 horsepower Ram Air 4. But the rarest of all were the GTO Judge Ram Air 4 convertibles. Only 5 were built in 1969. The Judge quickly became the best-equipped muscle car for the money, but was only temporarily successful at stopping the slide in GTO sales. Pontiac sold just over 72,000 GTOs in 1969, a drop of 20% from the previous model year. Pontiac discontinued the Judge package for 1970, and by 1971, sales had dropped down to 10,000 units, and the GTO was discontinued.